Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Ben, and this is the new Godin Session T-Pro. Let's get into it. So if you've watched my channel for a while now, you've no doubt heard me mention Godin guitars a few times. And the fact is, I think they're probably one of the best makers of North American guitars at their price point. The thing is, they use top-tier components, great tone woods, and they're not afraid to try new things, which makes them a fun guitar builder in my book. Now, Godin is actually a Canadian company, but they do manufacture and assemble some of their guitars in the United States, in New York to be more exact. And if you haven't actually heard their name before, chances are you have seen their multi-act guitars, which are, by and large, I think the most popular world-known guitar that they have. It seems to be the de facto electric guitar that's actually an acoustic guitar that you see at a live performance. But let's talk about this model. This is the Godin Session T-Pro, and it's based on their other model, the Godin Session guitar. But this has some updated features, like better pickups, better tremolo system. And the best part is I've actually seen these for hundreds off of their retail price, either because people don't know about them or if it's an overstock sale, something like that. But you can get these at a phenomenal price. Speaking about that, this guitar retails for about $1,400, which is about what you'd find it for on Amazon or Sweetwater, and that puts it right on par with the American Performer strap from Fender, which is also $1,400. So I think that's a good side-by-side comparison because that is the most affordable American-made Fender that you can buy. So let's see where these two sit next to each other. When it comes to the case, well, you got a black gate bag here, and there's more than your fair share of outer pockets for this bag. You've got this long skinny one running the neck in case you want to like smuggle in a bottle of wine or something. And then there's a big one across the body with room for sheet music, spare picks, metronome, other things like that. On the back side, you've got some padded shoulder straps. Inside, it's decently padded. There's an included neck support pad there with a strap to somewhat secure it in the bag. Inside the pocket, we've got a pretty minimal goodie bag. Looks like we've got a quality checklist toe tag, an ad for Jam Play guitar lessons, and some Allen keys for adjusting the truss rod and some of the bridge components. There's a similar gig bag for the Fender American Performance Series, but it is missing some of the pockets and the shoulder straps. I'm sure when you see this guitar, you have the same thoughts I do. It's very Strat-like, but there's something that's a little different. Sure, you've got a humbucker instead of another single coil there. Sure, the pick guard's a little bit different. You've only got a master volume and one master tone instead of having two tones. There's no jack plate on the front, but I don't think that's really what it is that most people are actually noticing subconsciously. All the business here is actually mounted deeper into the body than on a Strat, which gives it this illusion that the body's a lot more slender looking because you have less neutral space down here that doesn't serve any purpose, which also makes room for the jack on the side and the controls to move down here as well. Now, if you're a traditional Strat player, you might not like that because the controls are a little bit farther away. So if you're used to doing swells with your pinky, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But if you're like me and you have big dumb hands, I cannot play a Strat without constantly bumping the volume. And so this actually makes it quite a bit easier for me. Now the Session Pro is available in a couple different finishes. You've got this one, which is Arctic Blue, then you've got Canyon Burst, and lastly you've got Ozark Cream. And occasionally you'll see a specialty release of one of these with a completely different one-off finish. Now the body on this guitar is made out of basswood. I know that's going to be a turn-off for some people, but the fact of the matter is it's an affordable lightweight wood with a unique tone quality. Some people say they find basswood to be a little muffling. I can't say anything about that, but I can tell you that you will find basswood on $5,000 Jackson USA guitars, $3,000 Ernie Ball guitars, $1,500 Ibanez guitars, and this guitar as well. So it's all over the map, but I have to believe that Godin chose basswood for this guitar on purpose and not just because it's cheap. Now, dimensional differences aside from a typical Stratocaster, you've also got the belly carve like you would see on a Strat. And, you know, the horns generally follow some of the same shape, except they're a little bit more elongated. Now, one thing I do want to put your attention on is this neck cut on the back, which gives you a little bit easier access for the necks. And we'll talk about that in the next segment here. Now, the neck on this guitar is made out of rock maple. Godin doesn't have a very specific name for the profile or general shape of it, but I would say it's a very soft, uniform C. The measurements of it, up at the nut, we get a 1.65 inches. At the first fret, I get a 0.80 inches. And down here at the 12th, I get a 0.89 inches, which is less than a 1/10 inch of a rise for the first 12 frets. So if you play a Gibson primarily like I do, that puts it kind of squarely right in the slim taper category, with the exception of this neck being a very uniform C and not asymmetrical on the back. Now, the fretboard does measure a 12-inch radius, which does differentiate it from a typical Fender around 9.5 inches. And lastly, as you notice, this is a rosewood fretboard on this guitar, but there is an option for all the different finishes to get a maple fretboard. Now, as we mentioned before, all of the business is shoved a little bit deeper into the body. You might be wondering what that does with your access to the neck, because yes, that also is shoved a little bit deeper as well. Well, let me point this out to you. This is a Fender Aerodyne Stratocaster, but it does have more or less the same connection points as your typical Strat. Now, the neck meets the body between the 16th and the 17th fret on your Fender. And it is true on the upper horn for the Session T-Pro, it's actually meeting the body around the 15th fret. But if we flip the Aerodyne around, it's the same spot where your fretting fingers are, because it's a square block back there, right? But on the backside of the Session T-Pro, since we've got a little bit more of a cutout for your fingers, it actually ends up connecting at the same exact spot that your Fender Strat does. And lastly, in case you're wondering, there is no angle back for the neck. It sits flat with the body, just like on a Strat. Same with the headstock. Now for the hardware, we'll start at the very bottom, we'll work our way up to the top, and then flip it around as necessary. So at the bottom here, you've got, on this guitar, and pretty much every Godin ever released, Schaller strap buttons. I think that's a big knock on this guitar, particularly because I don't really like those. So if you do play this guitar with a regular strap, you're going to want to try and get either the other portion of the strap locks, which are unfortunately not included with the guitar, or you're going to want to change out these buttons for something that maybe you do like. Now just over from there, you get a side-mounted jack plate made out of polished metal there. Looks very nice. And then moving up from there, we get to the patented Godin True-Lock Tremolo system. Functionally, this trem system is nearly identical to a modern Fender trem system in that you've got a knife plate with all the saddles mounted to it, and then this knife plate meets up with two notch screws that then go into some threaded bushings in the body. Pretty much works the exact same way. But what Godin says is a little bit different is they claim this cavity is a little bit longer than what you find on a Strat, and that puts the springs already at a little bit more tension than what you get, which they claim makes it a smoother bend. I can't speak if that's true or not because I don't really use trem systems that much. But the reason they call this system a true lock system is that there's actually a little counter screw on the backside of where the whammy bar goes in, and you can tighten and loosen that. And when it's tighter, you can lock in where your trem bar is, or you can loosen it up all the way so it's still loose. It's not really any different functionally than when you put a spring in there. I guess the added benefit would be if you take the bar off to stick it in your gig bag or something like that, you won't lose the spring in the bag. And moving up from the trem system, we get to a polished pickup ring for the humbucker. A nice touch. I originally thought that was plastic before I started doing a deep dive into this, so I was very relieved to see that. And moving up from there, we get to the frets. Now, Godin just simply calls these medium frets, but they actually kind of resemble medium jumbo frets in that they're about 90 thousandths wide and 55 thousandths tall. So if you play any other major electric guitar, it doesn't feel any different than those. Just beyond the frets, we get to our dual action truss rod, which is great if you need to correct for forward bow or back bow. And then beyond that, we get to a couple string trees there. And that's for our E, B, G, and D strings. Then lastly, at the top of the headstock, we get to our tuners. Now these are Godin's proprietary tuners. These are locking tuners, which is great. It makes string changes a breeze. And in case you're wondering, these tuners come in at 18:1 tuning ratio, which pretty good tuning ratio, I think. They actually feel very smooth. And then we flip the guitar over, and not too much remarkable going on back here. You've got your neck plate here, which stamped with Godin, made in Canada. And then you've got your trem block, which is made out of zinc, couple springs, and then where it's sunk into the body there. When it comes to the electronics, well, you've got your basic 5-way selector here. Position 1 is, of course, the humbucker pickup. Position 3 is the middle pickup, position 5 is the neck pickup, and then position 2 is the humbucker in the middle, and position 4 is the middle and the neck. Then of course you've got a master volume and a master tone, but not just a normal master tone. No, this one is actually a coil split for the humbucker. Regarding the pickups, Godin put some pretty cool stuff in this guitar, I think. For the neck and the middle, you've got a Seymour Duncan SSL2 vintage flat Strat pickups, which according to Seymour Duncan, are made the traditional Fender way, whatever that means. These are both Alnico 5 magnets. Now for the bridge, you've got a Seymour Duncan Saturday Night Special pickup, which according to Seymour Duncan emulates the sounds of the 70s, and that's an Alnico 4 pickup here. Now the readings I'm getting here on the pickups are, for the bridge, a 9.23, for the middle, a 6.45, And for the neck, a 6.43. For position 2, the bridge and the middle, I'm getting a 3.82. And for position 4, the middle and the neck, I'm getting a 3.24. When I split just the bridge, I'm reading a 4.63. And lastly, in position 2 with the bridge split, I'm getting a 2.71. Now let's flip the guitar over and take a look inside the cavity. Nothing too crazy in there. We've got some generic pots and a generic ceramic tone cap, but that's kind of it. For the other materials, we'll start at the bottom of the guitar and then work our way up to the top. It's a small thing, but there is a rubber spacer between the strap button and the body, and that's the same with the upper strap button as well. Then next up from that, we get to our knurled white top hat knobs for the volume and the tone control. And why these are easy enough if you're doing swells or just to get a little spin on it, they're actually very difficult to pull for the coil tap function. So I might consider replacing just the tone knob, maybe something like what's on a Fender where you can actually get a little bit more bite, because these actually take quite a bit of effort to get that coil tap action. Then up from there, we've got our white tip on the pickup selector. And then moving on from that, we get to the white tip on our whammy bar as well. Then next up from that, we've got our white pickup covers for the single coils. And then we get to our pick guard. Now what's cool about this pick guard is it's like an emulated mother of pearl celluloid pick guard. It's a 4-ply, black, white, black, white. But what's really cool is the top ply has a laser etching of the word Godin, the brand name, and then the black ply underneath shines through. And what's interesting is that's only on the white pick guard for the Arctic blue finish. The other finishes have a tortoiseshell pick guard, and they didn't do any etching like that in there. Very strange, right? And then moving on from there, we get to our dot inlays. Now these are just acrylic dots on the neck. You've got them on the face as well as the side fret markers. And then going on to the nut after that, this is a Graphtec nut on this guitar. Nice touch. Now, I don't know why Godin did this. I think this is probably the worst part of this guitar's aesthetic, and that is this headstock logo. I just think that makes this guitar look really cheap. That is by far, to me, the worst part about this thing. I don't know what's with the balloon lettering. I don't know why they didn't do what they do on some of their other guitars. Like, for example, this is a Godin LGXT, and I think that is a much better looking headstock logo. So I don't know why they didn't do that on this guitar. Now flipping this guitar over, you've got a couple plates back here. You've got, first of all, the plate for the control cavity, which interestingly enough is a multi-ply plate, even though it's inset into the body. So you can't see these different plies. Very strange, right? And then here's an interesting thing. Sometimes you see this guitar for sale and there is a plate on the back over the springs, and other times there is no plate. When I got this guitar, the plate was there, and I took it off because I just don't like how it protrudes from the otherwise flat backside. And all the manufacturer's photos of this guitar, it doesn't have that plate there. So I don't know what you're gonna get if you buy this. Now when it comes to the feel of this guitar, well, I'll say this, the neck is nice and fast. It almost feels like one of those sanded necks, but it's not, of course, and it just has a wonderful feel to it. Now I have mentioned before that I have these big dumb hands, and generally they don't feel some of the intricacies of maybe something that somebody else will pick up, but for me, it feels great. Now when we talk about the weight of this guitar, well, this comes in at 6.88 pounds, or basically 6 pounds and 14 ounces, putting it at just about a pound lower than the average weight of a Stratocaster, which comes in around 7.5, 8 pounds usually. And how about neck dive? Well, let's find out. This is a 2-inch couch strap, which I think represents probably the average strap that most people have. Thankfully, most people don't do that when they're holding their guitar, but yes, this one was fine. There was absolutely no neck dive at all. So now we'll do the general sound test, and I'll mess around with the volume a little bit, mess around with the tone, maybe I'll tap it, and I'll put all that information on the screen so you can see what settings I'm playing with. Well, there you have it. That is the sounds of the Godin Session T-Pro. I think it's a great sounding guitar. I love the versatility of these pickups. Having a humbucker there in case you need a meaty or driven sound is great, but then being able to pull the coil tap, if you can, to get some of those Fender jangly sounds is also very nice. It's great to have the locking tuners up here up top as well. I think it's a better deal than the American Performer Strat. Sure, it lacks the prestige of having Fender written on the headstock, and actually, since it's got this ugly, dumb font here on the headstock, maybe that's a double downer, but for my money, I would definitely take this guitar over one of those. All right, guys, that is my review. If you liked it, consider clicking the like button. Maybe consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And if you have any comments about this guitar, leave them in the comments section below. All right, next time.